How's it going, guys? Today, I'm going to be featuring the Massachusetts B, the Tier 7 Premium American Battleship. Now, with the January 30th update, Wargaming has made some changes to the mods in the 4th slot. Some of them were nerfed and others were left alone, but the main thing is that they've added epic mods, which have a bonus that you can obtain throughout a battle. The first mod that I actually went for is the secondary battery reload mod, which I'm sure many of you are not surprised because I do enjoy my secondary battleships. And in this game, I basically decided to slot it on the Massachusetts. Some of you may be wondering why I put it on the Massachusetts instead of slotting it on the Brandenburg or Prinz Rupert, Zieten, any of the German battleships, which generally have better secondaries than the Massachusetts. Well, the main reason I didn't slot it is because, well, the secondaries on German battleships, when you slot the mod, already have an extremely fast reload. So if you were to activate the skill and stack it 5 times, which is the maximum amount of times you can, the bonus that you're getting is not as large as it would be for a battleship that has a slow reload. As an example, the Brandenburg and Bismarck 105mm secondary guns, when you have the secondary battery reload mod equipped, is a 2.7 second reload. If you were to max out the mod and get the 25%, you would go from a 2.7 second reload to about a 2-second reload, where you're basically getting a little more than half a second, and that's not a whole lot. In comparison, for a ship like Massachusetts, you have a 4.8 second reload, and then if you were to max out the mod, you would have a 3.6 second reload, and for the Massachusetts, you get a whole second of reload more. Now, even though the Massachusetts gets a bigger bonus to its reload, the Brandenburg and German battleships are generally easier to actually max out and stack the skill 5 times. With that being said, basically in my mind, the bonus that a Massachusetts would get over a German battleship is a bit better, and one of the things about these epic mods is that you have to unequip it with doubloons, 250 to be exact, and if you don't, then you're basically going to uninstall it for 2.5 million credits and also sell the mod, which I don't think is a good idea because as it stands, it seems like you're only able to obtain one mod and the missions don't reset every week. So when you do decide to slot your epic mod, make sure you do put some thought into what ship you're putting it on. Otherwise, if you're moving it around on a bunch of different ships, you'll have to spend a bunch of doubloons in order to actually see what it's like to have that mod on other ships, which I think is a bit unfortunate that Wargaming hasn't really thought this out, especially since this is a test. I do wish Wargaming planned this a little better because now with the changes to mods, some of them were just buffed. For example, the range mod was recently given 10% range, and then I did slot them on a few ships, and well, now they nerfed it back down to 5% and then gave it some dispersion. So now you're not getting the full 10%, so it might make more sense to just go back to the reload mod. And with changes like that, I feel like Wargaming should have given a grace period where we wouldn't have to spend our credits to switch back to a mod that may have been better in the first place, but ultimately now we're being forced to waste 1.5 million credits every time we switch a 4th mod slot because of the changes to the mods. Now, I do think there could have been better ways to implement these changes. Now, the main reason for these changes was to make it so that certain mods were less necessary, and you could have essentially moved away from these cookie cutter builds like they did when they increased the range mod. They essentially buffed the range mod to make it more appealing, and well, they are trying to do a little more of the same by nerfing some of the skills like the reload mod. Now, ultimately, I think they probably could have taken this a bit further. The AA mod, for example, that thing didn't get an epic mod because that skill is utterly useless, and there's really no ships that actually make good use of it except for the Friesland and maybe the Minotaur or Worcester. Other than that, there's not a whole lot of ships that make sense to slot that mod on. I think what they should have done was simply combine the secondary battery reload mod and that AA mod like what they did on PC. The new mod does 20% secondary reload and then 15% AA DPM. and ultimately I think that's a lot more useful and a reason to use the secondary battery reload mod a little more over the main battery reload mod, because then your battleship that has good secondaries will also be a little more potent against carriers. And the fact that carriers are not always guaranteed to be in matches, the reason the AA mod is useless, because if you slot it and there is no CV, then you're basically wasting that fourth mod slot, and you'd be better off using something else if it was combined with the secondary battery reload mod. At least that way battleships and some cruisers that still have access to it can actually make better use of it. Something else I think they should have done is add the new range mod to battleships. I think battleships in general for all the other nations, except for the Americans that use artillery plotting room, will decide to use main battery reload mod. If battleships were given access to the range mod, not only will they get a little more range to combat the cruisers that have more range than them, but also to have 3% more dispersion, which I think ultimately is going to help battleships and also be an enticing option, because then they could have 3% dispersion from that range mod and then also aiming systems in that first mod slot, which will net you 10%. And then again, ultimately, it will make some builds more diverse instead of having the same main battery reload mod on 99% of your ships. Now, going back to the gameplay, we've basically been sailing around near enemy ships and racking up a bunch of secondary hits. We currently have a 4 stack, and we are about 9 hits away from getting the 5th stack and reducing our reload by 25% for our secondaries. And something I forgot to mention was that the way you activate the mod is by getting 50 secondary hits, and every 50 hits you get an additional 5% reload. So currently we have 4 stacks, which means we had 200 secondary hits, and currently have a bonus of 20% reload once we get 9 hits and get our 5th stack, which we do here. You can see it's maxed out there on the bottom left. Now we have the full 25% reload reduction, and ultimately our secondaries are firing at about 3.6 seconds, which I really enjoy. The Massachusetts having a 6-second reload on the secondaries on its base is kind of rough, and I do enjoy having secondaries that actually fire a lot quicker, especially on a ship like Massachusetts, where you do have increased dispersion on your secondaries, so you typically can get a lot more hits than, say, a German battleship, at least when you're not using the secondary consumable. Now, the current build that I am using, I know for a fact many of you will not even think about using, because this is ultimately a build that you're not going to have the most reliable main battery guns. If you pay attention to the salvo, you will see that our gunners are essentially cross-eyed and the shells essentially went everywhere. For some reason, the front guns went to the left and the rear turret went all the way to the right, and then one turret actually went to where we were aiming. This typically does happen quite a bit, and the poor dispersion you see is a combination of having running with scissors, not having the artillery plotting room, and then also having ships with concealment mod or camel, which essentially stack up and make your dispersion as bad as possible. Now, I do find this a bit funny because even though the main guns are pretty troll, the damage that I've done so far in this game is 180,000 with 330 secondary hits, which I do think the secondaries definitely did help us out in this game. Although I'm not exactly sure how much we do have to thank our secondaries for the damage, because we do not have a detailed stats report at the end of battles, so we won't really know what damage came from where, and ultimately we just have to take it as a whole. After playing a few battles with the secondary battery reload mod, I think the new epic mods are a fairly good idea. I do think there are some things that could have been done better with their implementation, but ultimately I think the idea is there, and the implementation of these epic mods are essentially a good idea. But let me know what you guys think about the new epic mod and the changes that were done to the base mods, if you think the changes were necessary or not, and what mod are you currently grinding for, and what ship are you thinking about throwing it on. Currently, I have the secondary battery reload mod, and I've also unlocked the torpedo reload mod. I've been messing around with it on the Austriotland as I thought it might be quite fun because those torpedoes do reload extremely quickly already, and you can essentially throw out a bunch of them that won't dev strike a target if you land for torpedoes. But ultimately what I've been finding is that the torpedo reload mod on the Austriotland is not necessarily the most effective, because even if you max it out and get 10% more reload, currently my base reload is 63 seconds, so I would only get about 6.3 seconds less reload, and the change isn't really that noticeable. So I'm still trying to find the perfect home for that torpedo mod. Anyway, looking at this battle, 210,000 damage, over 3k base XP. We did get over 300 secondary hits. However, we did get the mod fairly late in the battle, and we really only got to see it in action against that Georgia, which the Georgia didn't exactly survive very long. Hopefully in the future I can maybe get another game where I max it out kind of early, and then we can see how effective these secondaries are, if they are essentially useful for most of the battle. Anyway, going into my build, it is Optimus Prime, and I am using a build that I don't think anyone really should use because it is very trolly and will probably cause you more frustration than normal. I think ultimately I'm just used to the poor dispersion and playing fairly aggressively, being a lot closer to targets. The dispersion doesn't really affect me as much as if I were to be sniping from max range. Anyway, my build, Optimus Prime with Revocation Protocol, Porcupine, Firefighter, Master Mechanic, and Running with Scissors. My inspirations are Hipper and Haruna for secondary performance. And then the mods, I have the secondary battery mod in the first slot, propulsion mod, concealment mod, and then you can see the epic mod there that's purple in the fourth slot. I think if you really wanted to run something similar to this, you would probably be better off using either Will to Rebuild or Fight Fire with Fire as a legendary skill, so you don't lose out on that much dispersion. Ultimately, this is a build I use purely for fun, and it's not really to get the best performance out of your main battery, clearly as you saw throughout the video. Anyway, that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, leave a like and subscribe for more, and share it with your friends, or leave a comment down below for other ships you want to see in the future, and what other mods you want to see. But until next time, aloha.